Yep, we are live.
Hey everybody, this is Making Comic Out episode 158 with our fabulous guest, Ian.
Hello.
Ian Chase Nichols, right?
That's me.
Ian Chase Nichols. Ian Nichols.
Yeah. I mean, I got too much going on. Yeah, I made the cover, like blanking for a second. But welcome to the show. I am Peter, and
I'm Alison.
me.
And
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Oh, awesome. I spotlighted the thumbnail on one of your projects. I don't know if you wanted an array of work, but I got some of your links down below where people can go follow you and check you out, and subscribe, and all that. But for anybody that doesn't know you, just do a brief bio of what you're up to.
yeah, tell us who you are, what you do, and how much you love it. So,
I am a lifelong comics junkie, and when I was little, of course, I was obsessed with, like, from my first book, the 1991 Marvel Holiday Special. From then on, like, I was just that was the coolest thing I'd ever seen, and it was a book that had like Art Adams and Sal Buscema and Ron Garney and Dave Cockrum and like Simonson Byrne. It had all these great creators working on it. So like, and it was all like little short stories. So I got to have a little taste of like the Fantastic Four and Thor, and it basically gave me this like intro to all these Marvel characters. And before that, I'd never seen a comic book or really known anything about them. And but I like to draw. So, one of the things that I first noticed was after, all the, you look at it until the pages are falling out and you see all the beautiful colors and the artwork, is that, there are names attached to this. People make these things. And when that revelation occurred, it was like, well, what does it take to make these things? Are these like, special super-powered beings that can draw these awesome things? I don't even know. And but you're just a naive kid, and I just I liked it. I pursued it, and I started like a lot of people do, just doing my own little comics and little stories and giving them to my friends and things like that. And I moved around a little bit, but when I was in middle school and high school, when you get your driver's license and you get your, a little bit more personal freedom, the comic store near me actually published their own comics, which was like this revelation. Like, they just could make their own books, and friends of mine were working on them, and that was where I got my first foray into, actually you can make comics without, working for these giant companies and things like that. And I started doing like, just the boring work that, artists, it just takes time and a pair of functional hands, like ruling panel borders and, doing a little inking in the background here and there and working on paste ups. And, before digital, when you actually had to paste the lettering onto it and cut it out with a little knife, just doing and doing all those things. And, I've actually gone back to doing paste ups on like some of my covers and stuff, because I just think they look better, after the fact. You send it in digitally and you print out the logos and stuff, and it just looks cooler, in your portfolio, because it's got all the, the bells and whistles,
all the stuff on it. Yeah. You get all the trade dress.
Yeah. And, I as I got older, I, was following art all along. I did, courses, private lessons, and went to college, and played baseball, and still made comics for that same store while I was in school. Graduated with degrees in both English and graphic design, fine art. I got out of school and I started working for a print shop, and I worked for a print shop for 5 or 6 years, running 1-color, 2-color presses, digital presses, oversized, like everything that is like the action finishing machines, saddle stitchers, folders, all the things that go into physically making the printed comic. Like, right out of college, I got firsthand experience doing these things in a retail environment, which, it's retail. It was like a mom and pop version of like Staples or Kinko's or one of those stores. And, all along I was still making my own comics and still with the goal of, one day doing comics. And, I dabbled in fine art stuff when I was younger, and, I really didn't enjoy that world. And it was just like, I just kept focused, and every time I went someplace, it was like to add something more that I could put into my skill set to making comics. And it was the print shop. And then I actually started working for a book publisher, and they didn't publish comic books, but, they had lawyers on staff that knew about intellectual property. They had, they worked with authors, obviously, licensing, and it was using these larger scaled things where they were printing, 30, 40, 50,000 copies of these books. And, I started off as just the lead designer, and then I went up to being the creative director there. And then, all this time I'm still adding, I got my first Ninja Turtles gig, I got my first IDW jobs, and then I slowly started adding more and more stuff. And around this time was when I first met Alison, and we were meeting and hanging out at Boston Comic Con and geeking out over dollar bin comics, which, I still do to this day.
Yeah.
So,
that Attleboro comic convention that we used to do all the time, that was great times.
It was the best. It was in the little Knights of Columbus Hall, like a Kiwanis club, and it was 15 or 20 vendors, and the same 6 local artists would show up, and two of the shows of the year would be good, the one right before Christmas, and then the first one back in the springtime. It was always you make $10 or $20, and then you end up spending it on $20 bin books and a hot dog or whatever. But I kept adding, and then eventually I got to the point where I had enough clients and work where I was able to do comics full time. And I have never really gotten consistent work from any of the big two. I still have not done anything for Marvel, but it's all been independent and self-publishers and stores, and still doing, some graphic design stuff to piece together a living, doing more of what I enjoy. Now, I didn't enjoy wearing a tie every day at the book publisher. I didn't enjoy that kind of stuff. So it was slowly getting towards comics. It's a tough business. It's a very, very tough business. And, I just constantly, I marvel at the other people that are able to do it. I think that it's really, really difficult for people who just read the comics to know everything behind the scenes, how people get work. What does it take to, get an editor to notice your stuff? How do you become your own completely self-contained publisher creative empire when you have to draw the book, write the book, letter the book, pay for the printing? It's a very complex business. And I really enjoy podcasts like yours that share some of that behind the scenes stuff, and you talk about these things, and you make it so that access to this knowledge, which was impossible when I first got into comics. You had to read things like the Comics Journal or comic interview magazines to get even just a glimpse of some of this stuff. So it's really cool. But that's pretty much
it's such a different world,
professional life up to this moment. So
Was it the Marvel put out that anniversary book back in the 90s that had everything in it, and one of the things that stuck out to me was in the back of the book they had how a comic's made, and it was an issue of Ghost Rider. I actually had the issue that was in it, and it showed everything, and that's where I got my first look at what they were doing to color the books. And I'm like, oh, that's like an ink wash. And it never really dawned on me. I figured they're using markers, or if they're just doing some type of a watercolor paint or something. That can't be watercolor. What is this? I'm like, oh, it's an ink wash. Oh, that makes sense. So that was eye-opening. Teenage me reading that book. Let's see.
Well, we got some people in the chat. Just so we got Crimson Owl Comics. We got Lyndon. He says Peter to doing all those. Maybe you can speak on the challenges. I can. Sure. I mean, you know, it's funny, like right before we started, you said that, like, you know, December or January were sort of downtime for you. It's the complete opposite for me, and I'm losing my mind a little bit. But it's like everybody's throwing things at me right now, and it's like, okay, I limit. I'm like, I got back to my own projects, and that's one of my challenges right now. It's like I don't have enough time to do my own thing, or you know, take time off. I just got one deadline after another, but hopefully I've focused on getting a lot of things done, and this week focusing on that too. So I can get back on my own project, which is retro. Anybody that watches this program regularly knows I'm a tech guy. And getting back to that
Peter,
now, I wanted another update. I did a quick Kickstarter for my project. You ever thought of crowdfunding? But that's the new world of independent publishing, and a lot of people crowdfunding, and it's really exciting environment, and actually to do your own project, crowdfunding your own project. And I dove in knowing that I didn't have anything really done, and I'm learning my lesson now. But next time I'll be much more prepared. But also my really career has evolved in the last 6 months, especially. I've been doing a lot of covers and, you know, inks on covers and whatnot, and somebody wants me to pencil a cover for their book and so forth, and it's all great, but I want to move slowly more into my own, focus on my own projects. So it's I'm not good at saying, you know, so I got to become better at that. What are some of your challenges that you face currently?
Me?
Yes, you.
Yeah.
I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure. Yeah,
Oh.
Peter's going. Peter, you're going in and out a little bit.
Oh,
I mean,
did I?
Yeah.
I mean, I think my challenges are similar to most comic book artists now, where it's like, you know, you're always pitching books to publishers, and then you're also doing your own stuff, and it's trying to find that balance of time management. And then you also have to, like, take care of yourself. Like, I mean, there's a little bit of where, you know, in the last couple of years, I've just, like, taken this hard line where it's like, you know, I am going to go exercise 3 days a week. Like, and you don't think about that stuff necessarily as a reader of a comic, but like, it takes so much labor to make these things. It takes hundreds of hours to do these things. And that's when you're doing it by yourself, or you're doing it with a small group of people that, like, with whatever budget you can pull together. You know, one of the things that I found that helps me a great deal is, and is absolutely worth the investment, is I found a terrific flatter. And what that is they go in and lay down, for listeners that don't know, they go in and lay down all the flat colors, and then I can go in and quickly either change the color or just do the rendering over top of it so that it is ready to go for me to letter it. And I've just found that that's a labor stage that is worth the investment. There's very little creative to do about it once you assign all the colors and you're just getting through the issue. That it's worth for me to spend the extra money to do that. I mean, and it's budgets, and you know, when I first started, there was really doing my own thing. There weren't crowdfunding. There was no crowdfunding, so I had to budget differently out of my own pocket, out of my own life. You know, I had it down to the point where I knew how much each of my meals cost. Like, this meal costs me $6. This meal costs me $12. This is a $2 meal. Cereal is a big money saver. So if you want to save yourself, you know, quickly, but like, print minimums, digital printing really changed the game, because you could print 25 copies of your book, and then you sell those, and then you can reinvest that into printing 50 copies of your book. and then it's 100 copies, and it just compounds and compounds. And that's how I started doing self-publishing. Was I saved, it doesn't sound like a lot now, but I think it was $250 to print my first comic book, and that's scraping away. You're paying your rent, you're paying your insurance, you're paying all this stuff, and just to put that amount away and then just be able to sink it into your book, that's how I started. And it's something I'll still do to this day. Like I did that with my first Axe of Hellena book, like just to get the ball rolling. I do intend to take the completed story to Kickstarter. And I have participated as an artist or as a contributor to other Kickstarters. And I completely understand. There was one where we launched it, and the book took me 8-9 months to do, because I was penciling, inking, coloring, and lettering all by myself. I don't want to do that with my own stuff. I want to work on it as I can, because life happens and you got to take whatever jobs you can. I'm about, I would say, halfway through issue 2, and issue 2 is like a 50-page book. So like I'm moving along as I can. And when I get the 6 issues, I'll take the trade to Kickstarter, and the people who back it will know that it's done. And as soon as the Kickstarter ends, I send the money to my printer. I've got some great printers that I work with. And heck, one of them will do all the fulfillment for me. I just send them the files for the prints, the t-shirts, the whatever, and then they put it in each of the boxes, and I don't even have to box and ship that stuff. Like I want a hands-free Kickstarter situation is what I want with my own stuff.
I want the contact info for them. Just saying.
No problem. But that's another thing. Like, or even if you're just selling your own artwork online, like you have to take time to boxing an 11x17 so that it ships properly and gets there safely. You can't do it in 5 minutes. I mean, it takes you 20 minutes with all the tape, the wrapping, and everything, and then you got to weigh it. Yeah, it's
you
all
get a
these little
sufficient
things.
backing board for it. So yeah, I mean, I got that piece from David Finch. I kept the backing board that he sent, because I'm like, oh, that's getting reused. So
that drives my wife a little nuts, because I'll be like, hey, this is a good box. I'm going to keep this box. I'm going to use this box later to ship stuff out. And then, it's in your corner of your office. I've got a whole stack of them right over here.
That's
good cardboard.
Yeah. I shipped out some artwork last week, and I actually took some time to go through my closet, which was just stacked with, I received packages, artworks, and everything, and I just piled it up. I was like, most of this is garbage. Okay, so I'm going to throw all this out, good stuff, and for future pack. But yeah, it's a whole production, because it's not like easy 10 minutes and you're done. It's a whole elaborate system that you have to go through, and everything takes time. Everything takes time away from the actual work. But that's like you said, like you look at the comics and like you don't know what goes into it, and there's work that goes into it. You can just creating the idea initially and writing and penciling and inking, coloring, lettering, even the excess pages of all that. You can use USPS priority box as I can, and 2 UPS boxes, cut one and put the other one in. Yeah, you can do that.
Those work pretty well for domestic. Those work pretty well for domestic shipping, but they never make it intact if you go even to Canada. Like I've done 3 or 4 packages to Canada, and you have to add like hand cut or like pre-cut cardboard sheets into it. Like it's just not sturdy enough to take the pounding. Like and also you can't use the USPS boxes if you're going to ship FedEx or any of the private carriers. They won't ship it if it has the USPS stuff on the outside.
Yeah,
that's actually that makes sense.
Before I got into comics, I worked a 9 to 5, and I was a messenger initially, and then I worked myself into the mailroom, and that experience was good, but it was so long ago that everything's changed. It's like, with pricing and how things are shifting, all the is. So it's almost like I have to relearn that I'm for the first half of my career, I didn't ship anything. It's only kind of recently that I've been shipping work and those things. And it's such a, like change quick, like in the post office. But yeah, it's like, once I'm done with my comic and looking, I had over 80 pledgers. So all 70 packages. I plan to get professional packaging materials and everything, all little merchandise and magnets and all that kind of fun stuff. So that's going to be a much bigger learning experience. But I find it wonderful, like you mentioned earlier, that your own comic store had their own comics that they were making and involved everybody in the neighborhood. Is that store still around? Are they still doing that, or is it?
They actually they sold the store a number of years ago, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But like there's other stores that do it actually, and the people that I worked with at that store, I mean, they gave me so much information. Like Daryl Banks, who co-created Kyle Rayner and did a ton of DC work, I met through that store, and he lived in the area, and gave me such amazing information to learn from. And he was the first comics pro that I met, and I was so lucky that I met him because he's such a smart, nice guy, and he's been a teacher at CCAD, the art and design school there, and he was just like the perfect professional for me to meet because like he's such a great artist, and I met other people there like Nate Levitt who does work for like Paw Patrol, and he's done G.I. Joe, Marvel work, coloring, and all kinds of stuff. And
It's great. It's an amazing guy.
And they've all gone on to do other stuff after the store, but like New England Comics, who I work on the tick for, it's still published by the store. The store still does it. And there's another store in Bellingham called Rubber Chicken Comics. It's a terrific store, and they put out probably 3 or 4 books a year, and it's artists and writers that are like pull customers and people that hang out there, and pros that they know, like Craig Rousseau did the first cover for them. He did Impulse and the Perhapanauts and X-Men. He's done a million books. And you find that there's these pockets of creators all over the country, and there's super talented people that you meet, and you have to go there to find them. Like anytime I travel anywhere, I go to the local store and I hit up the local rack. The good stores support their local creators, and they have a rack of every local artist there, and it's just wonderful. And it's humbling. And you find people that they don't work for the big two. They don't work for Fantagraphics. They just make their own comics, and they do amazing things. Like around Boston, even just Cat Lemmy, Million Year Picnic is a great store. They have a rack of all the local stuff, and like Cat Lemmy and Dan Mazer and all these other producers of comics in the area that just do wonderful work. And unless you seek them out where they are, you're not necessarily going to find them. They don't all sell their stuff online, especially in a print comics world. Some of them have switched to digital, and they do stuff with like Webtoon and things like that. Like Sean Wong, who worked on the Tick for many years, does a book called Runners, and it's a science fiction epic that he switched over to doing on Webtoon, and he's just a tremendous artist, and he's had great success doing Webtoon. So
I met Sean years and years ago, and I moved. I'm originally from New York. I moved and gave her away, but I had his book at one point. Love his work. Fantastic artist. It's like I know a lot of local stores when I was growing up, and obviously I would go into Manhattan. I would never see, like, I knew they had local artists that did comics, but it was like mixed with everything else. So there was a question of like who's the local artists, who's the local creators. So it was always like, well, it's good, and some new indie book I never saw before. And back then there wasn't the internet to look things up easily. But I would love to show off your work if you want to share your website and maybe show off projects. There's a button down below.
Yeah, the share button.
I know, but my internet is crap.
Yeah, I didn't have it prep anything in that way to show off. I have, being now like an old man, I have, like the comics themselves that I've done. Yeah, that was the most recent cover I did for Dynamite. It was a variant for Vampirella number 25. It was a Christopher Priest book. It's the last book of the series.
Yeah, it's a Rhode Island Comic Con one.
It is. Yep, that one was for Rhode Island Comic Con. I recently did a book called Iron Face, which was a lot of fun. It was a Kickstarter book. If you go over to YouTube or Twitch, they have a really, really popular Twitch show where they read all these stories that were created by a guy named Dan Paul when he was a kid. And he created this character named Iron Face. And what attracted me to it was a very naive and young person's perspective on like all these crazy things he was seeing on TV. Like, what is a horror movie, an action movie? Like, showing, a Friday the 13th type movie to a kid and how they understand things is totally different than an adult. So there's very much like a Looney Tunes exaggerated, naive quality to it. And it was a lot of fun to work on. Obviously, I do the Tick stuff pretty regularly. Hopefully we'll have a new issue out for Free Comic Book Day this year, but they tend to make that decision late in the game, shall we say. I did some G.I. Joe stuff. Yeah. I'll show you my creator-owned stuff. So I do creator-owned. I love fantasy comics. I always have, whether it's the Buscema Conans, Nebres, like all the Bronze Age, Silver Age stuff. So I created a character named Helena a number of years ago. This is a cover by John Lucas, who did like Deadpool, X-Men, Superman. He's done all kinds of stuff. And here is here's a sketch cover that I did. And it's just, it's fun. Nice. It's sword and sorcery stuff. I know that, I think that was one of the first conversations we ever had, Alison, was about fantasy comics and Conan and actually getting to work on, to do a cover for Red Sonja was like doing an R.E. Howard character was a lot of fun.
I want that cover. On the book.
I'll bring you a copy next time we hang out. But yeah, like my dad gave me a giant stack of the Howard paperbacks as a kid. So that was like the thing, when you read Bran McMorn and Solomon Kane and Conan, when you're like 15 or 14, somewhere in there, it's like, this is awesome. And then you also like comics. So I found that they had comics of this stuff and they have varying degrees of quality, but they're just a lot of fun. So
Barry Windsor Smith, John Buscema, you can't go wrong with that stuff. So and
sure.
I love Savage Sword Conan magazine.
I'm gonna shamelessly
black and white. It was bigger. It's amazing artists working on it.
Oh yeah, I mean, and there were guys that did stuff that you didn't see very often. Like the first time I ever saw a picture of Solomon Kane, what he looked like, other than on the cover of the paperback, was the story that Ralph Reese did, and the inking in that is just unbelievable. Like that is one of the finest inked stories. Like his skill and it was mostly pen at that point. you know, because I got to meet Ralph years later and talk to him about it, and his work changed over time. But at that point, he was Wally Wood's protege, and he lived with Wood and he worked with Wood, and he had at that point, you know, broken off and done his own thing and been working commercially, and he had developed this style that he used in One Year Affair and National Lampoon. He did a handful of gigs for Marvel, and he did Web of Horror with like Jeff Jones and Bernie Wrightson and stuff. And it was one of the coolest stories I'd seen. And there was just this on the splash page. I wish I had it, but I don't. But like the picture of Kane facing off with this monster, and the normal way comics portray monsters at that time, at least, was very one-dimensional, and they didn't have a lot of like character depth in them. And in this one image, you see that this is a reluctant monster with not necessarily heart, but at least consciousness. And it was just so subtly done and daftly done that it's just I've never seen it in person. I have no idea if the original still exists at this point, but it was just like when I was a little kid, it was just unbelievable.
Yeah. Solomon Kane's my favorite Howard character, so.
I mean, arguably some of the best written stories that he did.
Yeah, I think those are the best written ones. I've read pretty much everything that Howard has done. My friend Jeremy is more the Howard scholar. Literally, he's a Howard scholar.
That's good to know.
Not like, you know, he hasn't been schooled on it, but he has stumped Howard scholars with his knowledge.
Wow.
So I definitely call him a Howard scholar.
Yeah. That's if I have questions, I'll have you be the proxy.
Was it? I'm going to shamelessly plug. What was it? My character Rowan with Helena. But I did.
Yeah, it looks great. Yeah, and it's got like it's got all the influences that like that. I find it so. I love seeing artists that do way different stuff than I would ever even try to do. And the manga influence that Alison has, and like the, you know, attention to detail, I think is inherent in most artists. Like we have this thing where like we want it to have everything we want, but like just the movement and like her own sensibilities added to those influences. It's always terrific to look at.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I had a lot of fun drawing it, and I was very happy to finally get it finished. But this is about Ian, not me. So I'll stop that. But I had a shameless about that.
I always like looking at other people's work. So, you know, like one of the first things I do when I log into the computer is I'll look at you know, some of the new stuff that gets posted on Comic Art Fans. It's a website where people post their original artwork collections.
Oh, yeah.
So you can see that site. You know, people that own, you know, Frazetta paintings and Steranko pages and Kirby pages, and they just are like, look at this. And I'm like, I will look at that. I can't afford that ever in my life, but I will look at that.
Well, look, it's cheap. It's only like 10 grand today. All right.
It's funny. A friend who's doing his own comic wanted a piece that's going to go in a comic, and he has a page on Comic Art Fans, and he like showed me that afterwards, and I'm like, the page, and it's like, okay, that cost a lot of money. It's like, I should have charged you extra for my use.
Well, one of the best things about becoming a professional comic book maker is that other people will sometimes let you trade your drawings for other drawings. And that's like, for me, that's like the greatest thing. Like doing a sketch trade with another artist or a page trade. Like I don't usually sell my published work, but like I'll do pinups and things like that. But like I will trade. Like and I like it because I you know, you're getting something that they spent time creating, and you know that they appreciate the time that went into it and the artistry, and it's just like it's a different thing than just selling a page or, you know, putting it up for sale. Like sometimes you have no choice, and it's good to have them to sell when you need to pay the bills. But you know, that's that was a long discussion I had. I think at early Rhode Island Comic Con with Walt and Wheezy Simonson about, you know, he kept all his original artwork, all of it. After a certain point, like he just said, yes, the Thor pages, the Fantastic Four, and he has said on Facebook like he spends more time scanning old artwork sometimes than he does drawing new artwork, and it you know, if he needed to pay the bills, like he could just take a few of those pages and sell them. I have no doubt there would be collectors that would pay, you know, tens of thousands of dollars for his amazing artwork, rightfully so. But you know, even on a smaller scale of that with my own work, like it's just like if an emergency, and look, I, you know, when I moved, I sold one of my tick covers and that covered the moving truck. Like that's the real life stuff that goes into this stuff.
Yeah.
I remember talking to Walt and Wheezy a few times. Like they showed up for like one of the first Comic Artists Guild meetings in Boston.
Oh, really?
And that was amazing. You know, they live in the area, which is great. Actually thinking I should probably reach out to Walt. I haven't talked to him for a couple of years, but I did have a pretty good dialogue with him. Maybe I can get him on the show for a day.
Hey, maybe.
I doubt it, but I might try.
It's worth asking. That's another thing that I, you know, is amazing about the industry. Like the worst they can do is say no. And you know, I've been so lucky with reaching out to, you know, different artists, whether it was John Lucas or you know, I have a pinup by like Alan Weiss or Daryl, or these folks that, you know, either back in olden times when you would meet them in person at a convention and you talk to them face to face, but like in current times you can, you know, send them a message. You know, a lot of them are just working artists like we are, and you know, if they can fit it into their schedule and if you can pay them, you know, their going rate, they might do it. You know.
Yeah, we what was it? That's how I met Rob Dunas, Sketchcraft. Is I was literally sitting in the hospital and I thanked him for his art because it was getting me through it, and that literally started to build a friendship. Was it? I made friends with Sean Gordon Murphy because of a conversation on Twitter, and he ended up like following me, and then we struck up a pretty good conversation. Dave Finch I met through the artist Jimmy Reyes, and I have a pretty good relationship with him. So yeah, it's definitely opened doors in other ways too. So hey, and that's also how I got like talking with Gail Simone a little bit too. So I can thank a few of the other people that I spoke to, that I was speaking with, that got me talking with her. My dream is to work on a book with her. So.
Oh yeah.
Mike,
Gail, like even before she started doing comics, I think.
Was it Michael Ponte? He's a friend of mine, and he met Ian at Rhode Island Comic Con back in the last one. He was incredibly impressed with Ian's work. So,
well, he had his own books as well. So right, that's Michael's stuff. Yeah, he had some very cool stuff. And those were like his, again, like the first comics that someone makes. It's always great to see because like I don't know about anybody else, but my first comics were terrible. Like they were cobbled together misunderstandings of like how things worked, and like, you know, the graphic design, that you don't leave enough room for the lettering, things like that. Like, you know, there's these simple learned skills that you just don't have at the beginning. And his books didn't have as many of those mistakes as mine did. That's for sure. So,
like, they didn't have as many as mine did either, because I corrected his mistakes as much as I could.
Well, that was very nice of you.
I like people's early works, though. You know, it's like there's a charm to it that later, like as they get slicker, it loses some of that charm. You know.
Yeah, well, you get the evolution of their art and everything, which is great. Was it Mike's actually the person I just did the cover for? So I did it back in September by the looks of it. But yeah, I know he's working on the book now, so I will have an alternate cover from him. He had me tone down the blood on it though, because I have this thing about blood and I like lots of it. So he's like, can you like pull that back a bit? I'm like,
just a little,
but it's fun. Yeah, my books tend to, blood stored in the body at 2000 psi. So, just saying. That would be the samurai films that I love.
Yeah.
I remember a funny thing with a con that Ian and I were both at. It was actually at the Attleboro convention. We were both doing sketches at the time and stuff like that. I think Marie was with me too, and I know Jay was there. And we're just sitting there, and always. Oh, I asked Jay to be on the show too, so.
Oh, okay.
I gotta get him, another local artist around here who's put out a huge volume of work.
The amount of work that Jay has done is staggering, and only like a fraction of it he's put out.
Yeah, but just damn the amount of stuff that he's done.
Yeah.
But anyway, I just remember we were sketching there, and we had the whatchamacallit, this kid comes up to me and he's like, "Can you draw like Mario and Yoshi and like Kirby or something in this in this pinup thing?" And Ian's like, so glad that he went to Alison.
It's one of those where drawing like the big-eyed cute characters, like even if I follow a style guide, like I'm just never comfortable like with how it turns out, especially if I have to freehand everything. If I have all the like the tools like my French curves and stuff, because I don't have a steady hand. I have a fairly shaky hand. So like when you have to go in and draw a perfect circle for the eyes or things like that, I'll get like a little tremor. And then like if you add all the little tremors that I have throughout the whole drawing, it tends to look like a demented version of, like, without fail, once a year I get asked to draw Sonic the Hedgehog. I don't know why. It's never the same person. And
it's because it's Sonic the Hedgehog.
To
I'll
date,
be right back, guys.
They're all terrifying looking, every single one. So, but it's some people draw some characters better than other characters, and I do like drawing exaggerated, funny stuff, but they tend to be they have a little bit more of that like that kind of Edward Gorey feel to it, where it's funny, hey, not funny, haha. So it's got a little bit more hatch marks and things like that. So, but it's still fun. So, do you find yourself working mostly on like with your retro stuff or with your commercial work that you're doing? Are you still mostly entrenched in like superhero genre stuff, or are you branching out? Like, what are you doing these days?
I mean, let's see. I've bI'm doing a lot of covers. Only a few of them have been superhero-ish. I'm doing one right now where it's one single cover, then one wraparound cover, and that's fantasy. And it really doesn't matter. It's like I always like working on new artists or artists I haven't worked on before, and some artists I key in totally right off the bat. Like there's no thought that goes into it whatsoever. It's like secondhand, and I can ink over no problem. Like this fantasy artist, it's like it's very detailed, highly detailed. I can't really show it, but we'll see it soon enough, I'm sure. But it's given me a challenge. It's challenging, but that's okay. It's like to be, I've been doing this 30 years, and to still be challenged is a great feeling, as well as scary. But I'm completely open to almost anything. Like, I typically get more in the superhero genre. But
I only ask because that's where I first saw your work. That's only one.
Yeah. I mean, like, I initially started working. I worked for my brother. Obviously, most people know Jimmy Palmiotti is my brother. He started slightly before me, and so I was assisting him and assisting a few other inkers just to have income, but taking on like independent comic jobs, and anything I can grab. And it was usually I go to the convention and say, "Hey, you need an inker?" Because I knew I sucked initially, and I got better over time. But it's like, I haven't found the balance because I'm not exactly there yet. It's like ask me a year from now because I plan to be more focused on my books. This year is about me getting a bunch of books done. I'm inking a graphic novel, my friend's book. Me and Alison will be doing, the list goes on and on. It's good to mention.
We're doing Nightmare together, so that should be fun.
Yeah.
So
excited.
since if you're mostly doing like still doing inking, you said you did some penciling. Are you still using the same tools that you've always used, or have they changed over time?
They have not changed. They're pretty much what I worked with on the first year of my career. Pretty much the same. Only slight differences. Like I used repeater graphs back then, but it's a different brand. Brushes. I still use a Winsor Newton, but I also use a Raphael. I used Higgins probably back then. I still use Higgins, I think, but now I use Pelican as well. The paper is like I used anything. I mean, it's like I worked on people's original artwork, so it wasn't what paper I had; it was what paper they gave me, which I hated immensely. Because everybody used the paper, and every single sheet of paper was different quality, and everything. You had to adjust your tool to the paper. You couldn't always go in a brush on something because it would bleed too much. Different things. But I love Henson paper. You can pick it up in Walmart. They have it. It says like superhero comic or something. And I love paper.
Strathmore paper, but I just like their paper a little bit better than Canson.
Yeah, I use the Strathmore as well. The only thing that I used to use Raphael brushes a lot. Like that was my brand. I went with those. But recently, in the last like 8-10 months, I have switched to the Kuretake Sable.
Yeah,
and it is as good as any Sable I have bought. Winsor Newton. They don't pay me. I'm just telling people because they have. It's great, and I was a diehard Raphael brush guy. And this was and I've hated brush pens my entire life, and this converted me. So
that same brush converted me. I used to use the Raphael, the Winsor Newton. I kind of went between them, and then I found that from an artist, Dave Kellett, who does Sheldon, the webcomic Sheldon, and he was talking about that. But he just says, "Hey, I use it to fill my blacks and stuff, and it's like it just puts down this sea of ink." And I'm like looking at it, I'm like, "That looks good. That looks really good." Then I went and I got it, and I'm like, "I can ink with this, not just put down hard blacks."
Yes.
It's like, damn, it's good.
And there's two versions. They do a synthetic and then they do a Sable one. And look, if it was a young artist just learning how to use a brush, the synthetic is fine. But if you're used to good Sable, the Sable is great. And if Mike DeFonte's question, I actually use the Doc Martens Black Star Matte because I like the finish. It's one of those old standbys that, Pelican I used at one time. I tried Speedball, and that's inks are another thing where you figure out what you like and how it moves off the brush, and each one of them moves differently. And I'm sure, Peter, they all have different properties.
Yeah. Michael also says I can't find Raphael anywhere now. I get my stuff online, so you can usually almost always find anything online.
The leader black ink, one of the ones I use. That's what a lot of mangakas use. And
I get my oh, nice. And to answer Michael's question as far as where to find stuff, Jet Pens. It's an online company. and they carry the manga stuff. That I actually just bought some. Basically, it's Deleter, but the brand is Deleter, but it's Zipatone, like it's the classic Zipatone, and I can't wait to cut it out and paste it down on a cover at some point soon. And,
I have a pile of that from Deleter, of their Zipatone that I got some of their manga things. I bought some of their manga kits, which comes with like everything you could ever need to do manga, including a crap load of Zipatone. So
I've done some zip in my career, but very, very, very little. It was always a pain in the ass. It's pretty much like Zipatone is like doing splatter. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, it is a lot of work.
Yeah,
that's why I do it all digitally now. It's far easier.
But it's like one of those comics traditions, and you know whether or not, you know, if you're an old comic fan like me, the way things used to look is sometimes how it looks in my head when I'm working. So you know, when I was trying to draw the old characters, or the characters that were new when I was young, and I would scan them in and color them digitally, they just didn't look right, because like they tell you it's these flat tones, but when you look at the book, it's not flat. It's just not. And you know, learning how to color with like the CMYK screens and stuff has been a revelation for me. And doing it
improved my coloring a lot.
In the exact same way, the same number of colors that were used by DC. I actually just added the Kamiko and Eclipse palettes that they used in their printing presses, and going in and using the actual dots and screens, and it's just like, this looks how I remember it. This looks right to me. And you know, there's a big comics I always thought of as being the merging of graphic design and illustration. And so much recently has it leaned heavily towards illustration, and much more even into like game design than in graphic design. And I see some artists who, and I do it as well, like I'll get lost in between deciding, do I make a graphic design decision on this page, or do I make an illustrative decision on this page? And it's two different directions to go. And I tend to find that the graphic design decision is the one I'm happier with, where you're making, you know, you're planning out your speech bubbles and your line of sight and your rules of three and everything else, rather than spending time doing the crazy renderings or adding, like, you know, the impossible backgrounds that are required nowadays, you know, that are all done in 3D SketchUp programs and things. And look, I don't use those. So like, in order for me to do those buildings, it takes me hundreds of hours to do cityscapes throughout a book. And that's one of the reasons, like, you'll only see a few issues of The Tick that I've done where he's bouncing around the city, because you're spending, or I am spending, I'm not going to say anyone else is spending the time, because they're smarter than me. I'll spend, you know, 3 or 4 hours of a day just gridding out the background. You know, that's, you're just gridding it out. And one of the things I bought from Jet Pens, and has saved me time, is pre-printed perspective grids. So just like you would do digitally, you can put it behind your drawing and put it on a light box, and then you have your perspective lines, and it has just been wonderful.
I've actually been thinking about buying one of those, because I like to do all my layouts and stuff traditionally. And if I set my perspective and all that on there, I mean, you know, I do it out the classic way. Then I scan them in and I work from that and do the bigger pieces. But yeah, that would be a lifesaver in a lot of ways. Okay, so I heard somebody talking good about them. So
yeah, it was totally worth it. Totally worth it. And you know, being able to, you know, it's always just reaching for what it looks like, adding things that get it closer to how it looks in my head onto the paper. And that's been one of those struggles from day one. You know, I'm not one of those people that has like can picture it in my brain and project it on the paper. I kind of have to carve it out a little bit, chunk it out, and then like once I have like the base little, like, here's the line of action and here's my horizon line, I then have to go in and grid things out. And you know, it can lose some of its life if you do that too much. So then you rework it, and it's more like molding something out of clay for me.
Yeah, that's what it
when
is a lot like to me too.
when Joe Quesada was penciling comics, like like actually making comics, and pieces and covers and whatnot. He had a whole set from grids and grids he made because he used feelings in his work. He worked on Daredevil Day, and he worked on some Batman stuff, and he had elaborate buildings at weird perspective, and I helped my brother inking. I think I did during his run, and it's like just looking at the raw pencils, you could pick up like how he went about, creating it. It's really informative. It's like I always recommend seeing original artwork in person and just looking at it and soaking it up. You can learn a lot. One tool I haven't mentioned back in the day. I think it was like pearl white acrylic paint came in a little bottle used for mostly stars. But you can touch up mistakes. You can do all sorts of things. But what I use now is this, and this is like a Japanese company that you shake it, and then there's a tip, and it's the white tip, and you just like blot it on the paper. The point goes in a little, and the white paint comes out, and it's really effective. It's a lot easier to. It doesn't dry up like the old little bottle of white acrylic paint did. So it's spelled, let's see, Voiskle, Voski or whatever it is. I think it's a Japanese company, but this is the best thing I've supplies. And you can put stars down, or you can put later and do all sorts of things.
Another whiteout pen that I use is called the Presto one, and if you haven't used them,
yeah.
The only difference being is that this one has like a ballpoint, so you can actually do you can't really do stars with it because it gets a little muddy, but you can actually rule lines with it. So it's actually you can get a whole different thing with it. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, I've used those. I don't think my experience was great with them. Maybe I was trying to go against the grain of what they, most people use it for. But I'm sticking with it at the time being. But eventually, it's like I'm diehard about using true traditional brushes of some kind. But at some point, I'll probably try, like you were showing off before, the jet pens and stuff.
Jet pens, you use Crowquill too, or?
Yeah, I do things with Crowquill. That's like, it's either brush or quill. Cool. Repairograph is more technical stuff, and what for either a straight edge or a French curve, you go with a technical pen. I know some people have done with the like a ruler and a quill. I can't do that. That gets messy.
Yeah, I saw Buscema do that on How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, and I'm still in awe of him doing that. So, yeah.
I mean, I could do it. But
it's a technical pen. So
I gotta go much slower, and it's like it's not worth it.
I was sitting at a convention in Colorado actually, and I was sitting a table down from Mike Vosberg, who did tons of Marvel stuff, worked on HBO stuff, and I was watching him do this commission, and he took out a ruler, and even at a convention, he took out a ruler and used a brush with his ruler and was able to do a perfectly straight line sitting at a con, and I was just like, oh. It was the coolest
Convention
thing.
is the worst place to, like, for me to focus, like, even to do something precious, you know. It's like, that's why that's why they call it convention sketches, because it looks like you did it at a convention. Like, you go in and be messy and do something nice, but nothing precious.
Well, and you can't even go big. Like, here's an example of like a commission I did at home, where like I do the buildings, gridded out everything. I was able to go in and do the spatter with the stars and everything, and you mask it off so that you can get the spatter in the windows, so it reflects the stars and things like that.
Awesome.
You just thank you.
Yes,
Yeah, the like you said, and I always make a mess. Like, I just can't help it. And whether it's spatter, like if you look along the edge of my like drawing board, you can see all the like, I got to get my pen ready or my brush ready.
Yeah.
I don't know how artists do clean.
I don't think ours is supposed to do clean. Especially
even
when you have a cat. It's not going to happen.
Pencil, like permanently ink stained hand.
Oh,
yeah.
That's the beauty of doing digital.
It's true. Selena says, Peter about those acrylic painter markers flow really really heavy,
really ready and work good.
The Presto is completely opaque, and the artist that I most associate with this is a guy I see using it at conventions all the time is Bill Sienkiewicz. He'll use this all throughout. He'll sign things with it, and that was one of those things where I never liked how metallic markers looked on comics, and they always faded. So I started signing comics with these too. And whether it's a black cover or chrome cover or whatever, it takes about the same amount of time to dry as those paint markers do. It takes a little longer, so you got to leave it out. Or in this day and age, you can't blow on things while you're there. You have to take another comic and wave it off.
Right.
So,
yep.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't noticed a transparency you just go over things twice. I'm so used to it. I don't even think about it. It doesn't even register in my brain that I'm doing that. But there's some things that are less transparent than others. It's got to find the right tool. It's like I don't have an art store. I have to go next town. I'm living in a small town in Kentucky. And the only thing in town is Walmart. They do have some supplies, but it's random if you go there whether you're gonna find for. But there is a Michael's the next town over, and Michael's will have everything I'm looking for. It's a good place to go explore new tools and paper and all sorts of things.
Yeah, I haven't, since I moved, there's no art supply, anywhere near me. So I have to either go into Providence, or when I go up to Boston, I'll go to either the Blick or whatever that's over on Huntington Ave that's been there. It used to be Utrecht, and it's funny, I talked to some of the older artists that I'm friends with, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I worked there back in the '80s," So it's a store that's been there for a while.
Yeah, when I was going up into Boston for an appointments, I used to have seeing a doctor up there, and I would hit the U-Track a lot. Right off the
Great store.
Originally I was going to art store in Manhattan, and there was Pearl Paint, which was Chinatown, and it was like of art supplies and paints and paper and everything. The whole day there, literally, So we got a comment for Ian. I read Helena and did some traditional work for X-Men gifts. I became inspired and decided I would do traditional pencils and then inks on the next. Awesome.
Thank you
So
so
it's
much,
not a
Michael.
question.
That's really nice to hear. Thank you. I'm glad you read it and you got something out of it. That's all I could ever ask for. So thank you so much. I can show you the next page I was working on. I was working on it last night.
Oh, that's awesome. Oop. That's not what I want to do.
It's got like some inset panels. Insets are tough. They gotta go with the flow. So I have the first part of the story up here where she breaks her axe free from being stuck in the monster, and then the brother's about to step in, and they figure out the reason why the monster's so mad is because it's just defending its eggs. I know, not the most original plot point, but it was fun to. I had to come up with a reason for that monster to be mad. Now that the story is called The Land of Monsters, and they go through an entire world of where most of them are just monsters doing what monsters do. But in this case, because it was like the second monster, I didn't want it to be too repetitive, so I was coming up with different devices and things where the characters encounter new stuff so that it keeps the next chase sequence or fight fresh until we, get to further down the plot.
I like it. The page looks great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, hopefully it'll be done, tomorrow or the next day.
That's usually how it works.
Yeah.
So, like I mentioned earlier, like I put down your link tree and your website. Do you want people to follow you? Around the interwebs.
Sure. Yeah.
Facebook, Instagram.
The places I'm most active are on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. I was doing some live stream drawings for a while, but I haven't been able to get back to them yet. I'm hoping to get back to them probably beginning of February. And in that case, I've got a YouTube page, I've got a Twitch channel, and it will actually, with the software I have, if you follow me on whether it's Twitter or Facebook or on YouTube, you can the videos, you can check those out. The old ones are there. Some of the drawings are better than others, but like you said, when you're doing it on the spot, it's not necessarily the finest work we've ever done. So, but we had a lot of fun with those.
I have a bunch of your artwork here. So, granted, I've been a fan of yours quite a while. So.
We've been friends for a long time, so and you've seen the evolution of I had different periods where you get fascinated with different stuff. I did, I had kind of like a point where I was like, Will Eisner, I've got to do more cartoony and movement and things, and get rid of panel borders, and and my characters were a little shorter, and then people were like, you've got to have more heroic proportions, and then I stretched everybody out, and I did what was like the tall period, and it was like more angular and things, and I actually have a appreciation for that, like 2.5 year period where I was doing that type of work, and it's it's sometimes it's been a detriment and sometimes it's been good, is that someone I meet at a certain point when my work is changing, they think of me as that guy, but in truth, at the same time as when I'm doing those things, they're conscious choices. They're creative decisions. It's not a result of not knowing what I want on the paper. It's a choice. And because I'm able to do that, I'm able to do I do the Wally comics for the Boston Red Sox, and it's like this bubble round head with 2 round eyes, and he goes around doing baseball adventures. But then conversely, I'll do Helena or Ninja Turtles or these other projects, and it's a very different approach. So it's I try to tailor things to go with the story or with what they're asking for. I mean, there was the first time I ever did a Turtles cover, they sent me a gigantic style guide, it was 80 or 90 pages, and they made me do some drawing tests. And that was, that's a common thing. If you're going to work for one of these big companies, they want to make sure you can draw, how it looks. and it was a very cartoony. It was an animated Turtles one because I was told just draw a turtle and send it to us. It's fine. And I drew like Mirage Studios because that was what I grew up with, and it was not that. That was not what they wanted. So, it was. I like to draw all kinds of stuff. I like to paint, and I'm I because we've talked about like the access the internet has given us. There's just so much inspiration from all places. Whether I see Alison's work all the time when she posts, I see Nate's work and Daryl's work, and there's so many. Every day I see a new artist, and they're just amazing. And it's one of those things that like I actually have to close my computer to get work done. So
I have that problem too.
Yeah.
Oh.
But yeah, if people want to check out my stuff, that's where you find it. And I try to answer messages as best I can. So
Well, I'm definitely grabbing that
Well,
perspective Navi template thing. I got it into a cart right now, so I'm trying to come up with another $15 to get free shipping. So.
And if we're wrapping things up, it was absolutely a pleasure talking to you. And it was great meeting you, Peter, because like I was a big Aquaman guy. Yeah. So like if you have any of those Aquaman pages lying around, you just give me a call.
No, I get asked all the time, and it's like I sold those when I did those back in the 90s.
I completely understand. So, but yeah, if you ever wanted to collaborate on something, or you want me to help out in any way with your show or anything, if I can connect you with another creator, I'm happy to. So just thank you very much.
We're always looking for people to interview, so you tend to know like everybody. Thought I had a pretty good knowledge of people, but no, I've seen your friends list.
Well, it was a pleasure meeting you, and I checked out a lot of your work beforehand, of course, and great stuff, man.
Thank you.
Keep up.
Thank you very much.
Excellent.
All right.
Talk to everybody later. See you all tomorrow. Right?
Yeah.
Take care, everybody. Thanks again.
Watching, like, subscribe. Play to our Patreons, all that jazz. And we'll see you tomorrow. Same bad time, same bad all that.
Yep. Bye.
It's not clicking.
It's not clicking. Okay.